We are back in the tent. You know, I always say this, that it's a special friend or a special someone. But this time I really want to talk about, a special friend, Mona, who helped me along the way to realize that entrepreneurship was born in the Middle East, in Egypt specifically. So you've convinced me that entrepreneurship was born in Egypt from where you are from. And then along the way, you've been a friend, mentor, advisor. You've been a rock in a sense. You've grounded me. You've helped me, as you call it, tune me down a little bit, because I was all over the place. And this whole thing has been kind of an interesting roller coaster ride for me. And you've been there at every step. So I want to thank you for that, first of all. And, just really quickly, tell us, who's Mona Defrawi? What have you done, which is a lot of different things. What are you working on now? And just briefly let our audience know who's this power woman from Egypt who's now building this massively insane, awesome thing. So, Mona, thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it. And I just want to say that it's an honor for me to lend any support for you. You have tremendous energy, and all I really did was just to help root you so that, the giant crown of your tree can blossom upon all of us. Seriously, I love what you're doing. I think it's really important for us to build these bridges. And it came at perfect timing because, as you know, the country where my family is from, where I was born, Alexandria, Egypt, and lived for my first 6 years of my life, had a big revolution recently. And a lot of the revolution was about economics. And so I do not believe that economic opportunity and jobs are going to come from corporate structures. I mean, we're seeing that here even in our country. So entrepreneurship is absolutely critical to help expand and grow what the spirit of the revolution was trying to create. People, future optimism and all of that. So your role is really important in playing an important role to play. I also think, so what am I about? I didn't realized that I was an entrepreneur. I graduated college a little bit early at age 20, and I loved everything that I did in college, but nothing was the one. And it really wasn't until about 6 years later, my last year of business school, until I took my first entrepreneurship course, and it felt like, oh my God, it's a diagnosis. The first step to the cure is a diagnosis. I'm an entrepreneur. There's really nothing wrong with me. There's a reason why I like to work 7 days a week and why I love to create things. And just because, I need to be doing something new and every couple of years and always on that very steep part of the learning curve. That's a classic entrepreneurial personality set. We love to work hard, we love to create, and so I realized that pretty early on in my career. I had some experience with different things, and all of the early things that I did are incorporated into what I'm doing now in my fourth company that I founded. So I have worked as part of the management team of 4 companies that went public during the 90s for almost 10 straight years. I also was part of the core team of a private equity fund that started up. So I have 5 startups where I was a team member, and I've also started up 4 of my own companies, 2 consultancies, and then now 2 Silicon Valley startups in the financial services arena.
And can I throw in something?
Sure.
And being an entrepreneur doesn't always mean tech and financial. In the middle of all this, you also had a yoga studio or a career, basically, where you just kind of shut this whole thing off and really wanted to do something that you were passionate about as well, which is not technology, not financial. So
well, it actually, to me, yoga is technology. It's science and technology for health and happiness. It's really technology for the central nervous system. But yes, so that was one of my 4 startups, and I was actually at the height, after 10 years basically on Wall Street as part of the management teams, the greed of the late 90s, the bubble greed really got to me, and that wasn't why I got into helping entrepreneurs and starting up companies. And so I took a little mini retirement after that. I was teaching entrepreneurship at Johns Hopkins, which I loved. I'm the daughter of 2 professors. So that came naturally, but without a PhD, I couldn't do it full time. I had extra time on my hands, so in my retirement, I ended up starting another company, which is one of the signs of being an entrepreneur. And I thought, oh, how difficult could this be? A yoga studio I didn't play golf, so I was upping my yoga game during my retirement, and then I ended up with 20 employees and being the #1 studio in Baltimore, and then slowly realizing that this really was science and technology for health and happiness. It was designed that way, And what it did was it helped me ground. So part of the reason that I saw your energy and I recognized, you know, the tremendous enthusiasm and passion and optimism that you have, which are all classic entrepreneurial qualities. And I had those too in the same level of abundance, but it's really about grounding all that energy, literally, just like into a light bulb. You know, you have to have a strong structure so you don't blow that light bulb out. You can't send 1,000 watts, you know, through 250 watt structure.
Not for very long, at least.
Exactly. So what you do is you grow the structure to hold 1,000, 2,000. It's literally a process of enlightenment.
Can we talk about that for 1 second?
Sure.
The day I came back from the Middle East the first time, literally, you turned to me like, Nima, you're scaring people. Like, and I was so fired up. I mean, it was like as if I'd been to the moon, or I had discovered like something new. But I was so excited, and yeah, at that point, I was still talking about a venture fund and an incubator and all these crazy things. And then part of the grounding process for me was, you know, the meditation I did, the 10-day Vipassana meditation.
Which I also told you to do.
Exactly. and those 10 days of silence really allowed me to at least somewhat plant a couple roots, in my case, and ground myself. But that was like really where this whole thing came about. You know, the idea, the vision, the path as far as what we're trying to do with PITME, and it's the same thing that you said, economic development, peace through technology. That vision was right. I was just trying to use the wrong vehicle. I'm not an investor. I never will be. And I love this, you know, and I love learning from people. I love talking to people. I love sharing this knowledge, and that's what this is about. So I want to talk about one thing you talked about really briefly, your father. So your father and I had a talk. We've never met, but he's doing something really amazing in Egypt. So tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll talk a little bit like what you're doing now. But I wanted to specifically talk about what your dad's got going on in Egypt right now.
Okay, great. And then I want to come back also to the relationship aspect of what you're doing, because I think it's absolutely critical to economic development. So my father, I was lucky to be born, you know, to the most amazing father in the world, Muhyiddin el-Defrawi, who is actually arriving here today. So he moved back to Egypt 2.5 years ago. He's 80 years old. He's back in the village where he was born, halfway between Cairo and Alexandria. And he arrived just a couple of months before the revolution, and he came to this country after Nasser's regime came into Egypt. My parents were educated at Berkeley, got PhDs from there, and then also spent a few years at Cornell University doing postdoctoral work, returned to Egypt where the new government then basically required them to sign papers that they were communists in order to teach. And after having been in this country and knowing what freedom was, my father realized he did not want his children to grow up without freedom and without a voice. Yeah. Which, you know, fast forward, you know, now, you know, 45 years later, almost 50 years later, you know, the revolution is really about the exact same thing. So what defined his life is in Egypt right now. And so he, you know, connected in a very strong way. So he's in the villages. And so a lot of the riots and so on are happening in the cities. Yeah. He's a little bit quieter there, but in his village there's a 70% illiteracy rate. How can you really have freedom and opportunity for your children and for your country without education? So he found there were 60 or 70 school children which were out of school because their parents couldn't afford to pay the tuition. So he started by taking care of them right away and writing the check to make sure the children had what they needed. And then, of course, the villagers, learning of his generosity, started lining up in front of his door, and he wanted to help all of them, but knew that he couldn't. So what he did is, in a very American way, organize the village so that we could all help each other. And he created the Friends of Kafr el-Defrawi Homeowners Association. So everybody who owned land came in and donated like $20, which is actually, you know, a lot. Sometimes that's a monthly income for a family. And then they created a board, they created a legal structure. It took a couple of years. It's now up and running. Yep. And as part of this, we actually connected through PITME. You introduced me to one of the first people, Lee Lawrenson, who had created Rock Candy Egypt, inspired by the Egyptian Revolution, that in 8 days nonviolently, they took a bad presidency down. and created more opportunity for the people. And so as one of the first projects, Lee wanted to get involved in my father's literacy program.
Yeah.
And so now my father is starting, I believe they're starting in 5 cities in Egypt. So in addition to Kafr al-Defrawi, there will be 4 more. They are teaching, literacy, not just to the children who are in the school system, but to adults who are there who don't have that. And so the Kafr al-Defrawi Homeowners Association is starting to fund that, and also he's been working with the Minister of Education to help fund it. And so we'll be looking, for additional support for that, because ideally his goal is to have all Egypt reads by 2019, which is a very big goal. So
that's not that far away. So
that's an
ambitious goal.
It
and your dad is so funny, energetic. He goes fishing. He does all these things. And I mean, again, I haven't met him personally, but I've talked to him, and
you will.
It's just amazing that Steve Lang said the other day that his best days are still ahead of him, and no matter how old he gets, and he doesn't reflect on failures or things in the past, good or bad, and he just always looks forward and says, how can I make my life and other people's life better? And that's really, really, I think how your dad must feel at this age, to be taking on such a big project and such a profound
for
vision.
him it's fun. For him it's fun, and he's starting easy. He took care of the 60, 70 school children. Now he's teaching the adults, because he knows the teachers have extra time. They would like to have a little bit of extra money. It's very affordable for him because the cost of living structure is so much less in Egypt. And a little bit at a time. We'll start with 5 schools. We'll see where it goes. But also having a big vision. So my father was the entrepreneur role model for me. I mean, he figured out how to get away out of Egypt, behind the Iron Curtain when no one was allowed to leave. We were essentially political refugees in Europe for nearly a year before the papers, came through, and we were all allowed into America. So it's very important to, keep those gates open, because you bring in great talent. My parents gave 45 years, 2 neuroscientists, PhDs from Berkeley, gave 45 years to this country, their best years. And that's how America keeps growing. I mean, part of the talent pool we have here.
That's how it works.
Yeah, and he's helping to create that educational structure in Egypt so that we can
absolutely amazing.
Yeah, give opportunities to everybody.
So briefly, you've already, one of your companies was sold, and it was kind of a
2 actually.
2, but the second one specifically, it was kind of a baby of yours that you built, and then the company bought it, kind of took it in a different direction. So now you're building something even bigger.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about Equidity and what you're doing with this, and it may not even really seem real to most of our audience what you're trying to build, but it's pretty amazing and pretty big. So tell us briefly about that, and then we want to get into your story about a lesson. So.
Well, it's funny because in venture capital and finance, we fund innovation everywhere, but we're like the cobbler's children. We innovate every industry but our own. We can't conceive and imagine that ours can be innovated.
Yeah.
And so I did build my last company, Inside Venture, to help fix the IPO crisis. Except 4 years ago when I started, I was too shy to say that because it sounded like it was too big. Now I guess I'm older. I passed certain age milestones, and I'm not shy anymore. We are here to fix the IPO crisis. It's actually plumbing, it's not brain surgery. It was disappointing when the acquirer of our company decided to focus on secondary liquidity only as a way to make money, really, as opposed to fixing primary liquidity, which was a way to open up and expand the whole industry, create more economic growth, create more jobs, because all of our industry and American economy depends on IPOs, depends on public markets. I mean, that's what trades on the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ.
I think now there's like this big focus on startups raising money and getting started early, but I see the big problem is what you're
right. The focus is there just because that's what's moving. People are writing smaller checks. People can't write bigger checks anymore. The venture industry is severely disrupted. People don't talk about that. It's very hard to raise money anymore. And so just like Andreessen Horowitz was able to come in just a few years, become the top brand in venture. Why? Because they brought in a PR person, made her a partner in the firm, and they are PR hardwired. So that's exactly what my company does. We've created a platform since I was investor relations, and PR was also part of what I did for companies that went public. So we've created a platform that hardwires the PR into a platform, making it super easy for companies to have a consumer brand. If you're trading on the public markets, you need a consumer brand. This is the public markets. So that's what we've done again, and coincidentally, in the process of selling the first company and building it, this time it took even longer because the economy is worse, we've actually, all of those reroutings and our learning opportunities, we have a much bigger, much brighter model today than I did 4.5 years ago. So it's all really perfect because we have something better. So as an entrepreneur, you can never look back and say, oh, this was a mistake, oh, you know, I could have done this faster or whatever, because the truth is in the process. And so if you embrace everything that is happening, you actually get way further ahead and you have a much better product at the end, which we do have now.
Very cool. So we're at the point where we do a story around a lesson. So I don't know if you took a look at this board, but if you want to pick one, some of them are funny, but there really are important points that people need to learn, specifically in the Middle East. So have you picked one?
Another pivot.
Okay, that seems to be a popular one, but that's very important.
Well, that's part of what I was finishing saying is that so I built my first company, Inside Venture. It took me 9 months to raise the funding for it. I set up a second headquarters here in Silicon Valley. It took me 2 years to transition to moving here. So we started in 2008. And then the economy crashed on us just a few months after starting, and so funding, became an issue. And half of the investors we had legally signed in actually weren't able to fulfill their commitments, but we still managed to get a great start, create a lot of traction, and get 2 parties interested in our acquisition. One of them succeeded. And then when it became apparent in the following year after my non-compete was up that the primary liquidity model was abandoned, the problems were all still there, so that was in itself a pivot in starting a new company.
Yeah.
So we put together a team and came out there, and I was basically building the same model again. And then, surprise, the economy was different, people were different, the venture capital investors whom we were serving, also their lives were very different. People were having terrible time raising money. And so funding primarily pushed us towards another pivot, which at the time was a very painful process. I lost, a couple of people who, were co-founding team members, but couldn't withstand the long wait to get funding. So what that does, though, is it weeds through who's really passionate and who's there. I have one team member who's been with me for over 3 years now through 2 companies, and he's so much better today than he was 3 years ago, having gone through the process. We also pivoted the model. We started out with an investor conference, which is basically what investment bankers do for companies. Now we've created the Academy Awards for the entrepreneurship industry.
That's
so
cool.
What investment bankers do is a B2B model, but to go public you have to have a B2C model and sell to retail consumers. So we've created that. The B2B we have through our platform, but now we've created a B2C model that we didn't have before. So we've actually become, a much stronger company with much better products. And the hardships of the economy, just like, the economy's been flat for 12 years, it's made companies stronger. So they've been able to create their numbers with less employees. And even though it's been harder on all of us, we've become stronger from it, so we now have a base that can build a big enterprise.
Very cool. Mona, I think you have one of these, but if you don't, next time when you're doing yoga, we have our PITME t-shirt. I want to thank you very much for making time.
Thank you very much.
And
awesome.
Look forward to meeting your dad, and if there's anything specifically we can help, our audience can help with the project in Egypt, I want to play a role in helping reduce illiteracy to 0% in Egypt. So, again, want to thank you. You are a role model for not just Middle Easterns, but women, but just entrepreneurs. You've definitely inspired me. So, thank you very much, Mona. Appreciate it. Thanks for your time. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks a lot. Hope you enjoyed it. I want to thank ArabNet and our sponsor, PayPal. And we'll see you next time. Peace.